Midway across the vast Atlantic Ocean, the captain of an Airbus A330 carrying 293 passengers and 13 crew declared a Mayday. Moments later, the situation became even more dire. The left engine failed, cabin lights went dark, oxygen masks dropped. The aircraft's electrical systems switched to emergency mode. With no engine power and total darkness inside the cockpit, the pilots struggled to keep the jet airborne. Flight attendants rushed to prepare passengers for what seemed inevitable: an emergency landing in the Atlantic Ocean. This is the chilling true story of Air Transat Flight 236, August 24th, 2001. Toronto Pearson International Airport. Air Transat Flight 236, a routine long haul from Canada to Lisbon, Portugal, pushes back just before 1 a.m., the planned route. A 7-hour flight crossing the Atlantic. The aircraft, a relatively young Airbus A330 with seating for 362 passengers. Built in 1999, it had logged just over 10,000 hours of flight time. It was loaded with nearly 47 tons of fuel, well above the minimum required. At the controls were two experienced pilots. Captain Robert Sisherby, years old, with over 17,000 flight hours, 800 of those on the A330. First Officer Dirk de Jager, 28 years old, with around 4,800 hours logged, and over 380 on the same aircraft type. What they didn't know was that a ticking time bomb had been installed in their aircraft just 4 days earlier. Routine maintenance had revealed metal shavings in the oil filter of one engine, a sign of potential failure. The decision was made to replace it. Rolls-Royce provided a loaner engine, but there was a catch. It had a different configuration than the original. The engine couldn't accommodate the existing hydraulic pump without interference from the fuel pump's inlet tube. Without access to key technical service bulletins, technicians made a fateful improvisation. They reused a fuel line from the old engine to make it fit. On paper, the fix worked. A ground test passed without issues. The aircraft was cleared for flight. But a fatal flaw had been introduced, one that would nearly bring down the entire plane. The early hours of Flight 236 were uneventful. Cruising at 39,000 feet, the aircraft flew steadily over the Atlantic, but several hours in, a warning caught the crew's attention. On the secondary engine display, the right engine was behaving strangely. Oil pressure was higher than normal. Oil temperature was lower, and the quantity of oil appeared to be dropping. The combination didn't make sense. Engine oil temperature typically rises in flight. This drop defied logic. The pilots dug into the manuals, but found no clear explanation. They radioed maintenance control, but no one could pinpoint the cause. What they didn't know was this: that reused fuel line had been grinding against a hydraulic line. The pressure and friction had caused the fuel line to rupture. Tens of thousands of kilograms of fuel were now leaking into the sky. The A330's fuel system is complex. It includes multiple tanks in each wing, a center tank, and a tail-mounted trim tank that redistributes fuel for balance. But that balance would become part of the problem. As the right engine's fuel leaked into thin air, the aircraft's systems continued to move fuel around. The trim tank, designed to feed the wings during descent, transferred its remaining fuel forward far earlier than usual. Soon, cockpit alerts began flashing. A fuel imbalance between the wings. On the A330, there's no automatic checklist for this. The ECAM simply warns the pilots and points them to the quick reference handbook. But in the moment, the captain and first officer relied on memory drawing from past simulator training. They opened the crossfeed valve and shut off the right wing's pumps to transfer fuel from the left. Unbeknownst to them, this action accelerated the fuel loss. They were now sending fuel directly into a hole. Within minutes, they realized fuel levels were plummeting too fast, far too fast. It was no longer possible to reach Lisbon. They began scanning for emergency alternatives and quickly selected Lige's airbase, a military airport on the Azores island of Terceiras, till over 300 kilometers away. A flight attendant stepped into the cockpit to report several passengers requiring assistance. The crew decided to visually inspect the wings for signs of a leak. With cabin lights dimmed, a flashlight was used, but in the blackness of the Atlantic night, no obvious fuel spray could be seen. There were no puddles, no glimmering streams, just the low, steady hum of a dying aircraft. They considered running the standard fuel leak checklist, but dismissed the idea. If it's a fuel leak, we'll have to descend. And that would make things worse, they reasoned. It was a mistake. Later investigations showed that had they followed any of the fuel leak procedures at that point in engine fuel leak, wing fuel leak, or even the general fuel leak not located checklist, they likely would. V landed with nearly 4 tons of fuel remaining, but cognitive bias clouded their judgment. Convinced it was a sensor error or faulty computer data, they ignored mounting evidence of a real physical problem. As fuel drained at a rate of 12 to 15 tons per hour, the first major crisis struck. The right engine flamed out. Captain pushed the remaining engine to full power. But within minutes, 13 to be exact, the left engine also failed. The aircraft now had 0 thrust. At 39,000 feet, in complete silence, except for the rush of wind, the A330 became a glider. The cockpit went black. Cabin pressure dropped. Oxygen masks deployed. With both engines gone, the aircraft's main power vanished. But a backup kicked in. The ram air turbine, a small wind-powered generator that popped out from the belly of the plane. It provided enough power for minimal instruments and control, but not for luxury. Spoilers, gone. Reverse thrust, unavailable. Auto brakes and nose wheel steering, lost. The aircraft was now a 140-ton glider, descending blindly over open ocean. To keep generating power, the captain had to maintain a minimum speed, but not too fast. A stall meant falling from the sky, not too fast, and the landing gear might not extend. As they approached the Azores, they realized they were too high, 13,000 feet, just 8 miles from the runway. With no engines to descend quickly, Captain made a bold choice. A full 360-degree turn. Gliders moved to lose altitude quickly. First officer lowered the gear and slats. The plane lost height, but it was still a steep and fast approach. Without engine thrust, flaps couldn't be extended. The aircraft would have to land at 200 knots, far faster than the usual 145. The A330 slammed into runway 33 at Liges, so hard that 8 tires exploded on impact. The plane bounced into the air, then came down again nearly 3,000 feet from the runway threshold. With no spoilers, no reversers, and poor braking, the crew fought to stop the aircraft. It finally came to rest just 600 feet from the end of the runway. Fires broke out in the landing gear. Evacuation was ordered. In just 90 seconds, all 306 souls on board escaped. Everyone survived. Air Transat Flight 236 entered history as the longest fuel-free glide ever made by a commercial airliner. 120 kilometers over the ocean with no power. Initially praised as heroes, the crew later faced scrutiny over their misdiagnosis of the fuel leak. Investigators found that several key opportunities were missed. In response, Airbus added software updates to detect fuel loss trends, triggering early warnings. Pilot training also evolved, emphasizing fuel leak recognition and scenario-based procedures. Despite the mistakes, the crew's skill in the final minutes was extraordinary. They were later honored for their superior airmanship by the Airline Pilots Association. This story teaches us that even with the most advanced machines and the best training, mistakes can happen, but so can miracles. If you found the story compelling, please give it a like, share it with fellow aviation fans, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life air disaster investigations. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss an episode. Thanks for watching.